Look. So in this video, we're going to talk about Timberlake Wertenbaker's play, Our Ajax. As you might guess, this is an adaptation of Sophocles' play, Ajax. And in my video on the Sophocles play, one of the things that I had talked about was a contemporary strategy for dealing with Ajax of modernizing it to work through or to deal more explicitly with PTSD, particularly since the early 2000s with the beginning of the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. And that's exactly what Wertenbaker has done here. As you can see from the cover, this is very clearly envisioned as a modern adaptation. I mean, we've got sort of modern, contemporary desert camo fatigues. You can see right here, you probably can't see this very well. We've got the end of a machine gun. On the other side, we've got a pistol holstered, etc., etc. And there's a lot of modern references in this play. Like, it's very clearly envisioned as being set in some sort of Afghanistan-style Troy. There are references to IEDs throughout. There's references to landmines. There's references to enhanced interrogation, including waterboarding and specific techniques like this. There's references to previous wars like Vietnam and to battles from World War II and things like this. So it's very clearly a modernized version. But one of the things that Wertenbaker does is really emphasize the PTSD component. So we get that. And she emphasizes this, I think, most effectively by democratizing it, I guess, in a way. By expanding the number of characters who seem to be experiencing PTSD symptoms. Because in Sophocles' version, it's primarily just Ajax himself. But in this version, when the chorus, which is not really a chorus, it's a group of soldiers, who in the Sophocles version would be a chorus, but here they serve a semi-choral function. But when the group of soldiers come on, the group of Ajax's soldiers come on, they start by talking about their dreams. So the first soldier says, "So I have this dream. I'm running through a bunch of street markets. I'm alone because I've been cut off from my platoon. I'm trying to find my way back to the guys. It's just me and nobody else running. What am I supposed to do? I'm scared shitless." And so we get these kind of descriptions of flashbacks and things like this from several different soldiers. Again, the same kind of thing that we actually get from Ajax as well, is this sense of like confusion, flashbacks, and things like this. That's really characteristic of PTSD. But then one of the things that's interesting when the soldiers come on is that the CSM, which is the company sergeant major, who's the sort of leader of this group, says, "Okay, as you were, any flashbacks?" So, I mean, there's clearly an awareness that this is what's going on, but then the soldiers, they tell him they're having flashbacks, but all of their flashbacks are sexual. They're about Penelope Cruz naked in a movie, they're about having sex with their girlfriends, they're about whatever it is. So it's an interesting dynamic that's introduced here, because not only do we have the difficulties of PTSD, we also have that sort of uber masculine desire to deny the reality of PTSD, to deny the reality of one's own emotional and psychological experiences. But, I mean, it's very clear from this play that the experience of PTSD is centrally encoded in the narrative. I mean, there's two bits I want to read for you. One is a speech by Athena, and the other is a speech by Ajax. And Ajax actually talks a lot about his experience of PTSD, but I think this one is particularly striking. Particularly since throughout this play, like Sophocles' Ajax, Athena is speaking mostly to Odysseus, but Athena is present and she's sort of speaking on behalf of the gods. So Ajax says, "The god's voice of war, I heard it clearly. Kill them all. Guiding my steps in the dark, I felt the god's love, the god's command. There's a sniper over there, lying in the dark. Got one of your men. Shoot! That child's not holding a ball, it's a hand grenade. There over the wall, see the shadows? Here, take these light-intensifying night vision binoculars, and you'll see the Terrys. Knock down that door. Quick, shoot, quick, mortars coming from over there. Hear the scream, one of yours again. I wanted to hurt. But it was sheep all the time, or one of the dogs who saved my leg the other day. Sorry, dog. Friendly fire, this motherfucking mother of all fucking battles, was a fucking mistake." So, again, we've got this sense of the loss of reality, the distortion of reality, and it's combined here, I think, especially overtly with this impulse for violence, this impulse to destroy as the only way of dealing with the world around you. We get the same kind of description actually from Athena much earlier in the play. And this is actually not that far off of what we get in the Sophocles version, except it's more modernized. She says, "I scrambled his eyes, his brains, and drew him to the cattle, who rustled and snorted and grunted. Well, I can't always tell the difference myself. Then to the dogs snoring, twitching in dreams of sniff and chase, just like you, Odysseus. And as his mind wandered and stepped on all of the unexploded mines of terror, I launched a barrage of blood-soaked memories again and again like mortars in his eyes. He didn't know where he was. Past horror crashed into the present, neon flashes of mutilation and children. That always works. On, off, the same again and again. His own, a film, a story, who knows? As I said, scrambled." So again, we have these recurring themes here, not only of the importance of violence in terms of how these people, these men especially, try and deal with what's happened to them. We also have sort of loss of chronology, and actually at one point, the CSM, I think, asks, "What's the chronology? What's the course of events through which Ajax murdered all of these villagers, cattle, and the dogs that had specifically been trained to sniff out IEDs and landmines and things like this?" And the answer is that once a man loses it, the chronology is gone. And we see this also here with Athena, this not just flashbacks, but the compression of events. And the compression of events in a sort of cinematic way. Like there's references throughout the play to movies, to it, the experience of these soldiers being like a movie. And so we get all of this sort of distortion of reality that's really at the core of the Ajax story, and it's made much more overt because of our modern understandings of psychology. But there's one more thing, one more bit that I think is really interesting here, because the figure of Ajax is such a tricky figure, because on the one hand, he is deeply psychologically damaged in ways that the Greeks did not necessarily understand, and that we have some knowledge of today. But he's also a figure dedicated to honor. He's dedicated to self-respect and to having an image of himself as someone worthy of honor. And so Odysseus is talking to Athena. This is later in the play. Odysseus says, or I guess it's a little over halfway. Is he going to kill himself? That's what I would do. I suppose it would give me a sense of control. And so that's an interesting point there. This idea that suicide for traumatized people is very often an attempt to gain control of a situation in which they don't feel they have any control. But Athena says, you're 10 years into a war whose purpose you've forgotten. Your massive contradictory voices jangling in your shaking minds, and you think you have control. It's very touching. Odysseus says, Ajax is a commander. He won't accept being a victim, even of his own mind. And Athena says, we see you all as victims, but then we take the long view. So this is an interesting thing here. This play was published in 2013. I don't know when it premiered. So, again, we're in 2013. We're 10 years into the war in Iraq. We're actually more like 12 years into the war in Afghanistan. By that time, by 2013, and even more so by today in 2020, yeah, people remembered September 11th, but it wasn't necessarily clear, I think, to a lot of people how the ongoing conflicts in the Middle East of US, UK, and coalition soldiers versus the Taliban or versus the remains of the Iraqi military or whatever it was. It wasn't clear necessarily how those things actually connected to September 11th, or even how they connected to making the world as a whole safe from terrorism. So, in the sort of long view of history, soldiers are victims. I mean, the soldier who goes and fights in Iraq today, or fights in Afghanistan today, or wherever it is, even if you win the war, you still had to fight a war.